Hello all, and welcome to today's session as we launch the key findings of the World Benchmarking Alliance's baseline assessment of the commitments made by 350 global food companies on progress towards the SDGs and the current level of ambition. I'm Diane Holdorf. I'm very pleased to be your moderator today. I join you from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. I'm really pleased to also be part of the Advisory Council for the World Benchmarking Alliance's food and agriculture work. This baseline assessment that we're going to be hearing more about and engaging our panel discussion on today is a really important kick point for us to think about where we can truly set the baseline for acceleration. We're going to use our discussion today to explore the role of leaders and the roles of action, talking to companies and other stakeholder groups on what is it that we need to do to really influence and transform the food system, and how do we use these findings to help us focus our efforts. These are all key inputs as well as we think about the actions we have to commit to in the lead up to the UN Food Systems Summit. For our conversation today, we are eager to have your engagement. We ask you to please use the chat function where the World Benchmarking Alliance's Food and Agriculture team are on hand. They're going to be ready to answer your questions in parallel to the panel discussion. And we'll be looking at those coming in and looking at how we bring those into some of the responses that we'll be seeking from our panelist conversations today. We would love to have you also use that chat function to reflect your own reflections on the results. What does this look like from where you are in the value chain or in the world? And how could the findings of this baseline assessment support the work that you're doing? We will be recording today's events and we will be posting it online afterwards so that we can really continue to engage the conversation around the results of the benchmark and what it is we can take further forward. Would be great to have you participate online as well using the hashtag #FixFood, hashtag eat at home, hashtag food systems, hashtag food systems 2021 and the SDGs. And we're really pleased to do this together as part of the Eat at Home series. It's been an amazing series of events and sessions, and I hope you've been able to participate in several other of those events as well. What I'd like to do now, without further ado, is introduce Dr. Agnes Kalibata. Dr. Kalibata is the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General to the 2021 Food Systems Summit. We're eager to have her input as a starting point, and we'll start with this video.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
We are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems, because together
we can build a just,
a resilient world.
A just and resilient world
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
So powerful, Agnes, that video. Please, welcome to you. I'm turning it over to you for our keynote introduction.
Thank you, Diane, for those introductory remarks and for showing that video. I also want to thank the World Benchmarking Alliance for this work that has been done and pulling us together here to talk about the place and role of private sector in the work that we are doing. This summit, as you know, and I say this a lot of times and you've heard it before, but this summit was launched last year, really recognizing that we are off track in a number of areas, mostly recognizing that we are not delivering against the SDGs, all of them, all 17 SDGs. And we have identified 5 objectives as areas that we must rally around to ensure that we come through. And I'll just mention them briefly: access to safe and nutritious food, consumer and consumption behavior, including how we access food, how we define food, but also how food is wasted or used. Then our impact on the environment, how we produce food, of course, impacts the environment, so that impact is recognized as well. Then the issue of equity and equity of livelihoods, especially after COVID, we know that that's a major challenge now. And then resilience to shocks, recognizing fully well that even before COVID-19, we are reading from climate change and that we need to do something about it. So those goals or those objectives are what we are anchoring our conversation in the food systems around. And what I'm seeing based on the report that was sent, what I'm seeing is that the food systems is a huge opportunity for private sector to actually have an impact on all 5 of the goals that I've just mentioned. Reading the report, I did recognize that only 12 companies are being called out. I say called out because all of you are doing an amazing pieces of work. All of you are doing great, but 12 are being called out for having fully committed to nutrition, environment, and social inclusion. And here, I just want to go through a few things that I feel like the Food System Summit offers. The Food System Summit offers an opportunity for all of us to impact all the objectives I just talked about, but also all those 3 areas that you all care about. So it offers an opportunity for private sector to express its best, to participate and express its best. So I really want to encourage you to look at this as an opportunity, not to feel shy, not to step away, but to engage and look at each of these areas and really be able to express where you see the opportunity for yourself to come through. The second opportunity is we've called out these action tracks, and there are leaders that are leading these action tracks, that they have identified areas and definitions of what engagement means. Being able to engage with them, but also being able to engage some of existing pieces of work, like the CFS principles on what is it called? Responsible investments in the food and nutritional area. These are areas we can draw on and really be bold. So I'm really here to talk about encouraging you. I do want to congratulate the 12 companies, but I want to make sure that the remaining 300 and something companies see an opportunity to work with us in the Food System Summit to step forward. We want to build on, and this is the third opportunity. Many of you have ideas that have already been tested that you're working on in the field. We want to build on those ideas. We want to pull them out. We want to profile them. Right? We want to be able to show them, put them out there, and be able to say that these are things we can build on. So where that opportunity is, please step forward and let them be part of defining where we are going as well. We have something we are calling game changers. Should you be sitting on a game changer? Should you be looking at an opportunity that provides an opportunity for us to change our landscape that type of way? Please do step forward and let's use that to define where our world goes. I think what is very clear for us now, as we talk about the Food System Summit, what is very clear is just the fact that we've run out of time. And anything we can do together, any opportunity that you see that we can build on, we are looking to do that. And again, here I'm recognizing that there are so many solutions that we already have. This is not ground zero. This is something that we've been doing for some time now. We just have to be a little bit bolder, a little bit more ambitious, and I would like to encourage you to do that. We need to think through how we build better accountability mechanisms, even as we go into this work and we go into the Food System Summit. And because this will give us an opportunity to be transparent, but also to create trust in the landscape. And I know World Benchmarking Alliance and all the other partnerships that we have around private sector engagement is doing a lot. But we would also, from a food systems perspective, be interested to work with you, to be able to profile you better, to be able to showcase you better and your businesses better, so that whatever you're doing is visible to other people and is an opportunity for creating trust in the system. I want to conclude on one area which I feel is extremely important, recognizing fully well that this is not an easy task for any particular company. This is not going to be something that any of us can change alone. This is going to require multiplicity and multi-stakeholders. And this is going to require cooperation among those stakeholders. So what the Food Systems Summit offers, again, as an opportunity, is the ability to understand some of the challenges you'll be going through, some of the trade-offs you face as you go through thinking how to engage differently, and how we bring all players around the table to help you with this thought process. I know governments have their role. Here we are talking private sector, but I also know governments have a role. Individuals have a role. Civil society has a role. So it's not something that you're doing alone. It's something that we share. I was saying yesterday to someone that I've never seen a place where we have so much agreement on what needs to be done. So I think the time is now to have so much agreement on how we get to do it. And I welcome all your ideas and look forward to working with you on ensuring that we use the opportunity that private sector offers to get our food system to a better place. Thank you, Diane.
Agnes, thank you so much. It's always inspiring to hear you speak about the opportunity that the Food Systems Summit represents for us as we really work in such close, collective, ambitious, collaborative action to deliver these transformations that, as you said, we know need to happen. Now it's how we have the courage and manage the trade-offs and the ambition to do it. So thank you for teeing that up. And I'm going to turn it now to Victoria, because Victoria, I think that the baseline assessment that the World Benchmarking Alliance has just put out is such a powerful tool relative to this. It creates a very meaningful starting point to recognize, where are we? Where are the challenges? How do we recognize those who are doing so well in the face of this complexity? And where do we look for the opportunity to do even more? So Victoria, can I invite you to come in and share these key findings with us?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diane. And a warm welcome to all the people joining us from different parts of the world. I saw Australia, Nairobi, Marseille, and Boston in the United States. Welcome. I'm sure many of you were eagerly taking notes, just like I was, during Dr. Kalibata's keynote address. And one thing that clearly resonated throughout her speech was the sense of urgency. We have no time to lose. And that is exactly why we at the WBA have decided to conduct a baseline assessment ahead of the UN Food Systems Summit. A baseline assessment to measure where we are now, where the 350 most influential food and agriculture companies are on the journey towards more healthy, sustainable, and equitable food systems. For those of you not familiar with benchmarking, we benchmark to measure and compare company performance. In our case, with the Sustainable Development Goals as the most important reference. Thanks to our funders, all the information that is generated from our research, we're able to publicly share, make available for free. Therefore, our data is widely used by companies, investors, governments, civil society, and individuals. The aim is always to recognize leadership and create accountability. So how did we come up with a method to measure food systems transformation? We started with the SDGs and translated the 17 goals into corporate action within 7 different systems, one of them being the food system. By 2023, we will assess 2,000 companies, 350 of which are within the food and agricultural space. We call these companies keystone companies because they are crucial to drive change within the system. Most of you will know that in the food space, there have been many meaningful reports and agendas published over the last few years, like the Eat Lancet report and the global report of the Food and Land Use Coalition. We have gathered all that information and translated that into a research area, focusing on 3 different dimensions: environment, nutrition, and social inclusion. Within each of those dimensions, there are several crucial topics that companies have an impact on. In environment, for example, we have looked at sustainable production, clean air, and reducing waste. In the nutrition dimension, we have looked at how companies are contributing to the availability and accessibility of healthy foods, transparent labeling, and food safety. While in the social dimension, we focused on labor rights and what companies are doing to improve smallholder farmer productivity. As Dr. Kalibata mentioned, the food systems transformation requires a holistic approach. It requires that a company is aware of its broad sphere of influence and acts upon it. Therefore, we have considered that a company is on track and aligned with food systems transformation if they have commitments for the majority of topics within at least 2 dimensions. From the 350 companies that we assessed, there are 12 that have such comprehensive commitments in place. You can see their logos up on your screen now. Interestingly enough, these companies are positioned in different parts of the value chain. For example, there's the dairy company Arla, the fertilizer company OCP, and also CNH Industrial, who produce agricultural equipment. This diversity shows that all companies can contribute to food systems transformation. The other top performers are Danone, Heineken, McDonald's, Nestle, Orkla, and Yara. The 3 companies at the top, PepsiCo, Thai Beverage, and Unilever, have even gone the extra mile and have comprehensive commitments across all 3 of the assessed research areas: environment, nutritional, and social inclusion. That is why we have invited PepsiCo today to speak in the panel. The 80 companies that you see listed as greatly lagging behind disclose very little to no commitments in all 3 research dimensions. While the group in the middle varies greatly, to some companies being close to top performing, while others have just started the journey towards a comprehensive strategy in maybe only 1 dimension. We hope that these baseline findings provide a motivating snapshot, inspiring all companies to step up their efforts. Moving to the next slide, I want to focus on the environmental findings. As you've seen, we have assessed several different environmental topics. However, 1 topic stands out from the rest. On the right-hand side, you see a picture of jubilant international leaders who signed the Paris Climate Agreement. That picture was taken exactly 5 years ago. Since then, the importance and the different ways in which companies can reduce greenhouse gas emissions has become ever more clear. However, we found that over 50% of the 350 companies have no targets that they report on. And I'd like to stress that for the baseline research, we haven't looked at whether those targets are in line with the Paris Agreement. We merely looked at whether a company has targets at all. So there's still a lot of work to be done in this space. Moving on to the nutrition finding, this is an area which proves to be the most challenging for all companies. To some extent, that is understandable. Also from a research perspective, we are constantly learning how to best assess companies on their contributions. However, for a particular segment in the value chain, this dimension should not be so difficult to figure out, and that's retailers. With 3 billion people in the world that cannot afford a healthy diet, retailers should do more to help consumers make better food choices. And other initiatives, as listed on the right-hand side, from organizations that are part of our alliance, dive more deeply into this topic and can provide further guidance on how to tackle this important challenge. The last key finding that I'd like to share with you is related to social inclusion. Overall, it was striking that not enough companies are taking leadership to drive social change. Most concerningly, we found that 40% of the 350 companies disclose no public commitments to eliminate child or forced labor from their own operation or their supply chain. With the COVID pandemic greatly affecting not only the health, but also the livelihoods of millions of people around the world, demonstrating corporate leadership by providing fair and decent work for everyone in the value chain, to every person that we depend on for our food supply, is something we desperately need. So what's next? We've only got a decade left to deliver on the SDGs, so indeed we have no time to waste. This baseline assessment looked merely at the first step, at publicly disclosed commitments. Our research next year will go much deeper and look at performance and the impact on the ground. The methodology for that research has been published today and is open for public consultation. We encourage you to read it and get in touch, because we can all learn from each other and we all have a role to play in contributing to more healthy, sustainable, and equitable food systems. Over to you, Diane.
Victoria, thank you so much. I think you did a great job laying out what the World Benchmarking Alliance is looking at with this aspect of looking at publicly disclosed commitments on where these 350 biggest influential companies across our food value chain are currently working against environment, nutrition, and social inclusion is such an important baseline starting point for us to help increase the understanding. And it's just great to see the panelists that we have here today. I'm really looking forward to the conversation with all of you. Jim, Andrew, welcome. Jim is the Executive Vice President of Beyond the Bottle business, and he's the Chief Sustainability Officer for PepsiCo. Jim, it's great to see PepsiCo in the top 3 here and what is already being really worked through and assessed. So we're looking forward to hearing from you on some of your lessons learned. Wei Chan Tan, welcome. It's great to have you with us. You're the Managing Director of the Consumer Goods Forum, which is a CEO-led global membership platform. We know you're doing a lot of work to address these key challenges and help drive positive change across both retailers, as Victoria was mentioning, as well as, of course, consumer goods manufacturers in this sector. So really looking forward to hearing your insights. Johanna Ralston, welcome, Chief Executive Officer of the World Obesity Federation. And given how big the gap is on what we've seen in this assessment here on nutrition, it's going to be great to hear your insights on what are some of the opportunities and efforts to reduce, prevent, and treat, in particular, one of these big societal challenges of obesity. And Bas Ruder, welcome, Global Head of Sustainability at Rabobank, where you lead the sustainability strategy and the sustainability policy framework. We know that Rabobank is a huge leader, particularly in agricultural finance globally, and there's so many lessons there to be learned. So really looking forward to hearing to all of you. Again, it's great to see the questions coming up in the chat. I know that our panelists will be taking a look at those as well. But let's perhaps just dive in and start with the conversation and see where this goes. Jim, I'd love to start with you. As we mentioned, as Victoria said, PepsiCo is one of these leading companies who's doing such a great job disclosing a comprehensive set of commitments to tackle challenges in environment and health and social inclusion. Tell us a little bit about the journey. What has been so powerful and crucial for embedding targets and getting this into the core business strategy in ways that you can publicly disclose and report?
Well, Diane, thank you so much. And I also thank WBA and Eat at Home for the chance to be here. And it's a great honor to represent PepsiCo. Our journey really began back in 2006. So we've been on it for a while. But it really became a true cornerstone of the company in 2018 when our current CEO, Ramon Laguarta, took over. And together with the executive committee, he's really made it an imperative across every aspect of our business. You know, historically, over the previous 15 years, there'd been a lot of great work done in areas like climate and water and agriculture, but what was missing was really a central focus and overarching purpose. And as we thought about it, you know, as a food and beverage company, what is it that we could do to really maximize impact? Because that's really what PepsiCo is all about. And as we looked at it, we said it's really helping to build a more sustainable food system. You know, as we all know, food is really one of, if not the main lever to improve environmental and societal health. And building a more sustainable food system really, you know, does a number of things. It helps provide nutrition. It drives economic growth. It helps with social development, and it helps protect natural resources. And so, you know, all of these things, as we looked on it, we said, a company of our size and scale, what can we do? And you referenced, and Victoria referenced, it's about action. We said there's really 6 areas that to us are key: agriculture, water, climate, and then packaging, product, and people. And so as we looked at those, we set a set of targets, but as we all know, the real issue with targets is not setting the targets. Though I applaud the benchmarking effort, and I think that's absolutely the first step. But for us, it's really about how do we embed those targets and really make them a part of the day-to-day business. And the way we do that is our senior leadership team, the executive committee, and the next level of leaders all have direct involvement in shaping the agenda, so the sustainability agenda, the decisions that get made, and then ultimately they have responsibility for driving action. And that makes every senior leader in the company accountable. It's not just me and my team sort of trying to figure out how we're going to hit the targets and chasing everybody. No, it's really working together as an executive committee and as a top leadership team to do what's needed to really fill out our agenda, hit our targets, and then make progress as we go forward. Now, I say that, and I would finish with a really important point, which is we know that our efforts, or the efforts, honestly, of any company, as was mentioned, are not enough. I mean, the food system challenge is simply too big and too complex for any one company. And that's why we believe that it's a combination, as Dr. Calavata said, around business and government and NGOs and all of civil society need to really work together to take bold action to drive systemic change across this very broad but critical system. So that allows us all to combine our strengths, to combine our resources, to build a more sustainable food system, which will operate within the boundaries of the planet, and also, as was referenced, create a better future for everyone. So that's really what the role we're trying to play and how we have been on that journey, and most importantly, how we take aspirations and translate them into action.
Jim, thanks so much for that. I think that this aspect that you shared about this being a CEO imperative and being an accountability of all of the business leaders, and therefore being translated not just into business strategy, but into business implementation, speaks to actually a lot of the questions that are coming through in the chat on, it's okay to do a baseline, but how do you know what the actions are that are coming from that? And of course, as Victoria said, that's the next step of the baseline, but it's important to see that companies that are doing particularly well in this have already done some of that translation into actions, in addition to the public space of commitment. So thank you for sharing that on your journey. Wei Chan, let me come to you, because as heading up this consumer goods forum, of course, you're working with a lot of different companies. You've got a lot of leaders in your organization, and you get a lot of exposure to what a lot of different organizations are doing. And one of the challenges that we see from the baseline assessment is that about 40% of the companies that are in this scope, not necessarily part of CGF, but just generally within what the World Benchmarking Alliance is looking at, don't have these commitments yet. And particularly in these areas of child enforced labor and their supply chain, which is an area that I think CGF has been really helping its members lead in. Can you share some of what you've learned through the approach that CGF has been taking to help tackle some of these social challenges in particular?
Sure. Thank you, Diane. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much to the World Benchmarking Alliance and also for EAT to invite me here today. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and great to speak to everybody. So just maybe a quick background on CGF so that you understand the context in which we operate. So essentially, we are an industry platform between manufacturers, i.e. brands such as PepsiCo. So Jim's company is also a member of ours. And also retailers. So retailers would be people like Alibaba or Walmart in the US, for example. So we are a CEO-led membership where retailers and manufacturers get together to try and solve particular problems. And so we have many different areas that we look at, and many of them are sustainability related. So many of them relate to the WBA benchmarking work, in fact. So the way that we actually try to tackle things is it's very difficult to get 400 members all to agree to move in a certain direction. And obviously, you know, I guess it's a bit like any huge political party where having everybody aligned is quite difficult. So what we try to do, rather than getting everybody aligned, is to get and create a group of like-minded companies to get them to form what we call coalitions of action. And those coalitions of action will then go ahead and try to implement a particular series of initiatives that are meant to solve a particular problem. So we have 8 of these coalitions, and in fact, many of them cut across the whole food systems transformation that we're talking about. So we have food safety, we have collaboration for healthy lives, essentially trying to find ways to get people to move towards a more healthy lifestyle in terms of what they eat. We also have forest positive, which is essentially trying to eliminate deforestation to some extent. And we have several of these, we have many of these, and we have 8 of these. And so in particular, the question you've asked around child labor and forced labor, well, we actually have one around forced labor, and it's essentially what we call this coalition, the Human Rights Coalition to End Forced Labor. So we recognize that human rights is a big, very broad topic. We also recognize that forced labor is a huge topic, and we're not arrogant to suggest that we can solve all of these problems at once. And so the way that we essentially tackle things is to form a coalition and then to tackle particular issues within a broad framework, right? And so the first thing that we've tried to do, is particularly on the social side, on the human rights side, is essentially only address forced labor, but then address forced labor first in our own supply chains. So we've got about 20 odd companies formed together in this coalition, and these companies are huge, right? So PepsiCo and all these others are all parts of these different coalitions. And you know, if you added up their sales, it's trillions and trillions of dollars. So it's actually quite a big deal when these companies form together. Now, it's not to say that we represent the industry, because we don't. But we are nevertheless a significant part of the industry. So by getting all these people to firstly look at their own supply chains themselves and impose what we call a HR due diligence system. So step number 1 is really to think about human rights due diligence systems within each company's own supply chain, and making sure that those due diligence systems are implemented. Once those due diligence systems are implemented, then hopefully, you know, through that process, we can then start to eliminate some of this forced labor, because the due diligence process is meant to try to be able to do that. So we're slowly moving in that direction. We aim to finalize what this due diligence looks like, and then we aim to implement some of this over the course of the next year. Now, it's an ongoing process, and as I said earlier, we don't have the silver bullet, we don't have the answer to everything. We are evolving and pivoting and learning as we go along, but with a very clear objective in mind, which is essentially to eliminate forced labor. But we can't eliminate forced labor in the whole world. We have to eliminate forced labor in our own supply chains first. So let's tackle that, and let's find the most concrete, practical way of solving that for now. And then over time we can expand and move in a slightly amended direction. So that's the way we do things: forming coalitions between the manufacturer and the retailer. Making, as Jim, to echo what Jim said, making it a CEO priority. So all of our members, so the members on my board, for example, we have 60 on the board, they're all CEOs. They're absolutely all CEOs. They're not the regional president, whatever, they are so Ramon, as Jim mentioned earlier on, he's a member of our board. And so we have all these very important CEOs engaged in the room, and they discuss things on a regular basis and make sure that these coalitions are moving in the right way, and push these coalitions. And so human rights to end forced labor is one of these coalitions. So hopefully that it gives you a flavor as to how we're doing it. And I just want to say, we don't have all the solutions, and we don't pretend to have all the solutions and the answers to everything, but we are humble enough to recognize that we've got to start somewhere. So let's start to move this thing forward. And then over time, hopefully, as we get more successful, we pull more companies in and also drive it to a slightly broader agenda.
Thanks, Wei-Chan. I think that's a great example of how companies come together to learn from each other, which is some of the questions that we're seeing in the chat from folks like Fabrice and Totweller, but equally how they can help push each other as well. Because if they're working together at that CEO level on issues that are that relevant through their supply chains, they're willing to uncover some of these tough challenges and figure out shared ways of working through them. So I think it's a great example. Thank you for digging in and sharing that. I appreciate that. I'm going to turn now to Johanna. I'd love to hear from you on this huge challenge around nutrition, because we know that nutrition is posing a really big challenge for companies relative to how to set out the types of commitments that'll demonstrate the action and progress that actually contribute to outcomes that benefit health and health outcomes like obesity. So tell us a little bit about your experience. What are the crucial actions? And maybe talk a little bit about some of the work you're doing with retailers in particular. How can they take actions that really promote healthy food choices?
Thanks so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I think what I want to do is actually build on both some of the comments in the chat and some of what my colleagues have already outlined, because it's not really possible to separate out nutrition from sort of the retail space from some of the other sort of areas that we're discussing here. And I thought just in 3 quick ways. I think at World Obesity Federation, we really see that there's a global syndemic, and we're starting to hear that term more and more. It's something 2 years ago, we produced a Lancet report called The Global Syndemic of Obesity, Undernutrition, and Climate Change, recognizing that in fact, we were dealing with a systemic problem that could not be solved in a silo, which is good news because I think we all know that silos don't work, but that the food system needed to be addressed both from a sort of obesity and undernutrition perspective, and then through the lens of climate change, which is sort of the deadly interplay of all 3 upon one another. But that means that there's also solutions that can be kind of double and triple wins. I want to just give a couple of examples of some of the local retail engagement because I think it's instructive. And I say this with the utmost respect. A lot of times things get decided at the CEO level, both in health and in food, that don't make their way down to the realities on the ground. And I think that that's one of the questions in the chat was related to that. And I think it's an important point. And so what can we do to incentivize that? So Guy's and St. Thomas Charities in London, which is in the Lambeth and Southwark sort of area, which is one of the lowest income parts of London, not coincidentally has the highest rates of childhood obesity in London. And so they've done some really interesting work with hundreds of retailers, convenience shops, not just sort of even the Waitroses and the larger grocery store chains, but some of the local ones. And there are many, many insights. And I think one of them is, for example, convenience store owners have a great amount of sort of control over what is carried in their shop, and convenience stores in low-income families tend to be a major source of food, and so getting more nutritious food into those outlets is an interesting key point. And I think that gets back to the importance of understanding lived experience of what it means to be only having access to unhealthier foods, and what are the sort of not doing a top-down, but a really bottom-up approach. That's even happening in South Africa, where you've got the highest rates of obesity, some of the highest rates of obesity among women in the world, in urban areas, which are predominant, and yet not an understanding of how much of it's related to what's available to communities. So again, that gets to the community point, and I think these are really key. Going upstream a bit, I really do want to I just want to applaud the recent study, which is sort of on investor expectations on nutrition, diets, and health, because I think it's so instructive and helpful for, in some ways, operationalizing some of what we're talking about here, looking at governance, strategies of companies, these commitments, but also lobbying, working with governments to use the force and the assets of the companies to encourage nutritious foods, to support policies that are health enabling. And then I think finally around transparency and sort of formal reporting as part of corporate reporting. I know a lot of that is happening. I think more needs to happen. And then that gets back to that kind of frontline retailer point. Why was it so hard to benchmark retailers? I think the companies have a role to play, but the investors obviously have a critical role to play as well. And then finally, I think my last point is really an interesting one that I'm hearing a lot about, and I'll just then wind it up because we've got a lot still to cover, is around the role of youth. Whether or not we change this, youth will change it. We have such strong youth activism around us. It's the next wave around food. They feel betrayed by what they feel is a world that's rather troubled, that they've inherited, and that very, very much is channeled into food issues. And I think let's work alongside them The only reason I possibly call myself a youth advocate is because I've lived with a non-communicable disease since I was actually a youth. So I'm this honorary youth advocate, but I love their energy. We don't always agree, but I think that we would all be wise to really be thinking not about us, but about this generation that's got an incredible amount of energy, and that looks to how can we have sort of a much more transparent world. So let's not waste this crisis on anything other than radical transformative change that's really health enabling for everyone. Thanks.
Johanna, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I love how you framed the nutrition challenge within community.
Yeah.
And then also within youth.
Yes.
How are we really making it people focused? And I think it can be very easy to get a little too far away from that. And so I really appreciate that you brought that back for us front and center. And this concept of how important transparency is as well. And actually, this is the whole point of why corporate reporting matters and why making sure that what you are doing is publicly available is influencing and reflective of how transparent you are as an organization and the work that you're doing. So it speaks to the power that can be in these types of benchmarks. So thank you very much for that. We do still have a lot to cover, but Boz, I'd love to come to you to just hear a bit. Rabobank has really made it your mission to drive sustainable change across the agri-food sector and has done a pretty remarkable job linking investment decisions to broader global agendas, especially these key environmental pillars, including climate, biodiversity, and food loss. And we've heard a bit of the talk here about the importance of investor and the investor community. Can you elaborate a bit more on this? Tell us about how these types of benchmarks inform decision-making that's already happening, for example, in decisions taking place in the bank.
Thanks a lot, Diane, and thanks for the World Benchmarking Alliance for such a great report and an important contribution to such a huge topic that needs to be addressed urgently. Honored to be in this remarkable panel and love to shine the light a little bit on the contribution that the financial sector can take. Rabobank is a food and agriculture bank with a cooperative background. So we are a cooperative, and as a result, we are strongly focused on realizing the best for the communities in which we operate. And that is also in the world of today. We actually set our mission as growing a better world together and focusing strongly on the food and agriculture sector within that because of our clients and the members we serve. And I think what is important here is that in order to be able, as a meaningful contribution of the financial services industry to help fight the trouble we're in when it comes to the food system, and we definitely need to change, we need to use more than just money. We need to use knowledge. We need to understand where we stand. We need to improve the system. We need to go through that transformation together. And we are in the fortunate situation that we can afford to actually have approximately 100 researchers focusing on the food and agriculture system every day, to gather knowledge on where it stands and to also describe, and that is what we're currently doing intensively, where it should go. So we have a sector vision on the major food and agriculture sectors, and we include sustainability, commercial opportunities, and risk management as part of those visions. Now, if you have such a vision, for instance, for the dairy sector, it's also important to understand where our clients are. And we have around 13,000 of the biggest farmers worldwide in a number of countries that are clients of the bank. And as a result, we have as a security well over 20 million hectares of land in our portfolio. So if we are able to make a difference with our clients, we are actually creating impact on the ground. Now, in order to do so, we analyze the current performance of our clients, both on the wholesale side in the food companies, but also on the large farmer client base. And if you then have your sector vision on the one hand, and you have the current performance of your clients on the other hand, you can actually design a roadmap for improvement. And in order to have the right client analysis in place, it is great to have benchmarks like the one we are discussing today, because it creates a race to the top. If you have a race to the top, you can actually design the next step, and you can finance the investments required to go that route. And we go relatively far. So we have a relatively large client base in the dairy sector. And that means that we are cooperating within that industry using a biodiversity monitor to actually look at the impact of our dairy farmers on the land, on the biodiversity, but also on energy, on their animal welfare. And on the basis of that, we help them to improve. So it's not so much of a system of punishing, it's a system of a step-by-step gradual improvement, for which we can then also provide the right instruments. And it goes as far as the fact that our managing board has as a personal target to increase the average sustainability performance of our clients in our loan book as part of the performance management for them individually, personally. So you can think of the fact that using that information, designing that roadmap together with the client, and then having personal commitment of senior management to realize those results measured on an annual basis for every individual client really helps to steer in the right direction. That's how we try to do that.
Bas, thank you. I think that's great. You know, you and Jim both spoke to the power of having senior management accountable for performance at a business level for the incorporation of sustainability objectives. And I love how Rabobank has taken that a step further to include increasing the sustainability of companies in the loan book. That's a powerful motivator. And you know, this reference to these types of benchmarks as an equalizer of how the data needs to look, but then used as a race to the top is a really important aspect to this. So, you know, thanks for highlighting the fact that there's this powerful knowledge sharing component. And I like how you worked in some of the answers to some of the chat as well. We had a good question from Gordon in there about how do you get more discerning? It's not just good or bad. How do you find the balance and across a system that's quite complex? So thank you. You know, this is amazing that we could have this conversation for so long. It's kind of surprising to me that we're already so short on time. What I'd like to do is do kind of a speed round at this point. It's clear based on the results of the benchmark assessment and everything that you've shared as this amazing panel here today, that we have to step up and action is needed. So we've got less than a year to prepare for the Food Systems Summit, which is going to be an important moment in time. It's not a destination, of course, but you know, it's going to be a key point of acceleration for us. What is the one action that you would focus on and call for people to work on together? And Wei Tan, maybe I can turn to you first. What would you point to as this really key area of focus?
Actually, a very difficult question, because I think you know, giving just one answer will be quite hard. But you know, looking at it from my own personal lens as a CGF person, I think food waste is a critical issue. So in other words, if we eliminate food waste, and that represents 30% of all food is wasted, that's a huge impact on sustainability in some way. So I think that's going to be a big thing. Making sure that we have access to safe food. So, you know, we have a food safety initiative, and you know, you've got to have, firstly, you've got to have safe food. If you don't have safe food, then it defeats the whole purpose. So that's almost like a foundational element. And then, you know, there are, I think the tricky one is what Joanna has actually articulated, which is trying to find a way to get people to eat in a nutritious and sustainable way. And so therefore, having some kind of metric to measure this, given that nutrition means different things in different countries, and therefore the answer in each country in terms of what a nutritional good plate looks like is different. But I guess the sustainability aspect may be the same globally, right? I think having a definition for that is going to be quite critical. So to me, if we can have that as a cornerstone of everything we do, then we actually have a goal to aim for, which basically says, eat like this over the course of the year. And if you eat like this, you're going to be healthy. And by the way, you're not going to destroy the planet. So I think that's the thing. But I think at the same time, when we say eat like this, we can't just be eliminate. If we say eat like this, we'll only end up eating fruits and vegetables, probably. Right? So there's got to be an indulgent component to it, because I think that's also important. That, you know, obviously in moderated quantities, to make sure that we actually have a good mental health balance. Otherwise, if you're going to eat fruit and vegetables for the rest of your life, I'm not so sure how happy people will be. So everything's about, you know, as the Chinese found out thousands of years ago, everything's a yin yang, everything's a balance. You know? And so I think we need to find that right balance. So I think maybe the answer to the question is the cornerstone is defining what that healthy, sustainable plate looks like. And I think that's the challenge.
Great. Thank you. And I love that you brought in how personal food is too, how cultural and how personal it is. And that's always important for us to remember. Thank you. Johanna, let me turn to you next. How would you help us focus our efforts?
I would say that focus on malnutrition in all its forms, meaning that that includes overweight, obesity, and undernutrition altogether, that we have one common platform, one common set of asks that are then tailored to different realities. But we are seeing more people, more countries in which people die of overnutrition related causes than undernutrition related causes now, which is a striking change. So we need to be playing both a short and a long game with that, and really just let's all rally and support that. There's some risk that malnutrition sometimes gets just equated with undernutrition, and I think it's really important to understand it's all one big sphere. So
yeah, no, Johanna, thank you. I think you're absolutely right to point to that. I just want to add a shout out to the comment that Fabrice added in the chat. Exactly on this point, we have to make sure that we're really addressing malnutrition as it relates to overconsumption as well. So thank you, thank you. Jim, let me please turn to you. How does this need to really drive action to and through the Food System Summit?
Yeah, I think that's the key, Diane, is how do we drive action? And I'm going to cheat and give you two real quick ones. The first is, how do we, all of us, continue to drive to build coalitions? Because it's only through coalitions that we're going to get the action we need to drive systemic change. And one example, we're working with our partners at WEF to develop food innovation hubs in multiple markets. We can't do that by ourselves. There needs to be a whole lot of companies. So one is, whatever the topic is, how do we build and drive coalitions? The second is on a more micro company level. How do we continue as companies to drive sustainability into the heart of our business, to make sure that we have clear metrics to measure progress against, to hold ourselves accountable, and then to be fully transparent, both externally and honestly also internally, because I'll tell you, the 270,000 associates at PepsiCo are really interested in what are we doing. So metrics, accountability, boss said it, race to the top, and then transparent. And then we all just need to get to work. I mean, 2021 is really a year of accelerated action to help build a more sustainable food system. It's urgent. I mean, I completely agree with what everybody else has been saying on that front. And, we're highly committed to it. And I think we all need to be in there together driving forward.
Yeah, Jim, thank you. I really appreciate that you brought such a sharp point to this key topic that each of you has raised, actually, about working together and the power of coalition to drive action. And yet at the same time, knowing it's about transparency. We have to be also balancing this with demonstrating what we're doing. And let's not forget the power of our own employee base. Really key points. Thank you. Boss, over to you to wrap up here with just a key point for us to take away.
I'll be brief and I'll answer a question straight away, part of the chat. We work on a coalition with World Wildlife Fund and Royal Friesland Campina to actually build a biodiversity monitor to be sure that we measure properly. So transparency on the basis of science-based targets is important. But we also work actively with the World Business Council and the Food System Summit organization on a finance track to actually let the financial industry improve their impact on a healthy food system. But also, and that is, I think, the most powerful part here, in our core business, we are currently rolling out a large number of sustainability linked loans in which the interest rate is linked to sustainability performance. And we look forward to use the World Benchmark Alliance results now to actually set the targets. So there is legislation for sustainability linked loans, for instance, by the EU, but there's also the opportunity to link external benchmarking data to interest rates and to target setting. And that is currently the thing to go for. Also in the food industry, we have, well, I was about to say hundreds, but tens of wholesale companies who currently prepare for such loans in order to also show to their investors that they take this topic seriously, from Tesco to many others. And that is actually the next thing to happen. So food companies in the audience, feel free to move in that direction, because it's really a strong, not just to us, but it's a strong way to show your commitment and to also convince your finance department. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and I think, Bas, this example of leadership by Rabobank of sustainability of linked with interest rates linked to sustainability performance, using this type of data is a really powerful indicator of what's possible. And I love how you framed it as let the finance sector improve it. This is something we're all working to bring everyone along with. So thank you, panelists, for a really remarkable conversation. I would have loved to have been able to continue this because there's such insights, such rich knowledge in what you're sharing here. But Victoria, let me turn it over to you to please close. And let me say again, thank you to the World Benchmarking Alliance for setting out this baseline. It's been a lot of hard work and certainly a lot more to come, but it's an important step for us all to have this increased transparency about where these big opportunities are.
Thank you, Diane. And most of all, thank you for being such a great, inclusive and informative moderator. We work closely together in your capacity as Managing Director at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and being an expert review committee of our food team. And our work, and also just as the work of all the panel speakers, and I would include the work and effort of all of you watching, is really complementing each other. Because food systems cannot be transformed by one company or one person, not even by any one nation. But each of our actions, every meal we prepare, every business decision that we make affects how our food future will look like. So with over 500 registered participants we had joining today, I hope all our efforts are not just individual grains scattered across the kitchen counter, but I hope that they blend and come together in a nourishing and sustainable dish serving the world. So in closure, I just want to wish you all a loving and healthy end of the year. I look forward to collaborating soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks all.
Thank you. Take care.